our board meeting. Today is Tuesday, September 20th. Board members present in the boardroom are members Lessons, Jacobs, Holloman, Higgins, and Bellamy. Joining us virtually, we have members Wilson and Donnelly. We also have with us, we have Dr. Jarrett Bryant, our superintendent, Ellie Shaw, our student representative, and Amanda Foster, our executive assistant. And with that, we'll do our flag salute and land acknowledgement. Ms. Shaw.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On behalf of the Anchorage School Board, I want to take a moment to recognize and offer gratitude for the sacred ancestral lands of the Dena'ina people. We acknowledge and appreciate that our offices, facilities, and schools are on these sacred indigenous lands, and we honor the traditional care that has been given to this land throughout generations. We are grateful for the opportunity to grow, learn, work, and create educational communities on the sacred land. We extend continued respect for the many cultures, creativity, and resilience of its indigenous peoples. Shannon.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to the approval of our agenda.
Madam President, I move to approve the agenda as presented. Second.
Moved and second to approve the agenda as presented. Any opposition? Seeing and hearing no opposition, the agenda is approved as presented. That brings us to item B, our community report. Ms. Shaw.
So SAB, or Student Advisory Board, had their first meeting on the 13th last Tuesday. It went really well. We had most of the high schools there and a good portion of the returning middle schoolers. We started off by playing a quick game to get to know each other. We kind of went through like the process of what we do in a normal SAB meeting. We heard from member Lessons, she just introduced herself and what she shares to the board, went over some just like normal like procedures for a first meeting. Our next meeting is October 11th at 11:15 a.m. And I do know for schools, we are all going through that homecoming season. So that is something that is keeping a lot of high schoolers busy with football, volleyball, flag football, cross country, tennis, other things. So I know a lot of high schoolers are super busy getting back into the school year. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Shaw? Right. Thank you, Ms. Shaw. So that brings us to item C, and it's just a placeholder tonight because we are still waiting on data so that we can do that our reading proficiency report. But our next meeting, we will have a report, or at least have a monitoring conversation. And we did reorder our agenda just slightly for this meeting and this meeting only. So we moved our superintendent update up to item D. So Dr. Bryant.
Sure. Good evening, school board and ASD community. So we did move up the superintendent update a little earlier this week. And one of the reasons is because I'll be sharing my update. I'll have a couple of staff members present on mental health and student support. So I'll keep my remarks fairly brief so I can allow my colleagues to share more about mental health and supports in ASD. But in sum, we look forward to returning to our regular board goal monitoring presentations next month so that we can resume our discussions on academic outcomes. Additionally, I look forward to continuing my school visits this month to get a firsthand look of the opportunities to progress as a district. For example, I had the opportunity to visit one of our Title I elementary schools last week, and I truly was blown away by the level of student engagement and strong instructional practices that I saw in the classrooms. It was energizing to witness numerous examples of strong reading and math instruction, and those are for students who need a high level of support. So while we do have a long way to go to improve academic outcomes, there are incredible teachers and leaders right here in ASD right now. So I did want to recognize that. And I'd also like to give a special shout out and congratulations to Huffman Elementary School, which was recently named a National Blue Ribbon School. It was one of 297 schools across the nation to receive this recognition this year. So a way to make ASD proud, Huffman Huskies. So tonight, as I mentioned, we'll have a special presentation from the Mental Health and Student Support Department. Before we move on to that presentation, I would like to provide a few high-level updates. Transportation. We are still actively seeking bus drivers. So currently we have about 62 vacancies, but we do have 35 drivers in training and another 16 who are in the interview and vetting process. I'm also hopeful that as the tourism season winds down, that we'll finally be able to hire more drivers for ASD. But it is important that we remain vigilant and urgently recruit and retain our bus drivers. For those who are currently employed by the tourism industry, we truly hope that you'll consider a career with ASD as the season winds down. Our eyes are also still on the long-range strategies, such as our third-party review of our transportation practices, and we look forward to providing updates to the board in the coming months on our plan to prevent this situation from reoccurring. The next thing I'd like to provide an update on would be the budget. We are continuing the process of engaging the community and stakeholders in the budget planning process. Last week, we convened all principals for their monthly professional development. And during that day, we hosted small group conversations to gather principal input on budget priorities. We are also gathering community input via survey, which can be accessed in 5 different languages at asdk12.org/FY24 survey. We encourage all members of the community to share their ideas and concerns about the budget, which will inform our decision making. To date, we've received over 900 responses, and we're looking forward to reviewing more thoughts and feedback from members of the community. I will say, though, that in order to address a $68 million budget shortfall, we must explore many difficult options as a board. I want the community to understand that we are still in the research phase of this process, and the administration has not provided recommendations at this time. Everything must remain on the table, and as the semester progresses, we'll have a full picture of our options to select from so that a balanced budget is passed in the spring. And lastly, I'll close just by mentioning that September is Attendance Awareness Month. And in ASD, our attendance rates have been holding strong at over 90%. Ensuring strong attendance is truly a community effort. And we are appreciative of our families as well as our bus drivers for getting students to school every day. And on that note, I will pause for any comments or questions before we move into mental health.
Thank you, Dr. Bryant. Member Lessons.
Thank you for that report. I was not paying attention to our agenda, and here it is. I'm wondering we're now a few weeks into the school year, which is enough time to flag our chronically absent students. So what is the district doing? What are individual schools doing to really target the students who are already have already passed the threshold of being chronically absent or showing warning signs?
Sure. That's a great question. So essentially, we recognize as an administration that when our students are not in school, learning is not taking place. So for that reason, there may be a number of campus level strategies that are happening. Chronic absenteeism, it is a bigger issue at certain campuses than others. So I don't want to not state that our campuses aren't working, because I know that they're working tirelessly. Everything from calling up families. I spoke with principals last week that mentioned home visits as a strategy for students that are chronically absent. Thinking about ways that we can leverage technology to reach students via text or email or other means. These are all things that I'm hearing anecdotally at the campus level. And I would be happy to provide a written statement as to what we're doing at the district level to also tackle the chronic absenteeism. But I will say that our division directors are supporting principals as well to troubleshoot those strategies. So we'll provide that update.
Thank you, Member Lessons. Any other questions for Dr. Bryant, before we continue with Member Donnelly.
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Bryant, is one of the options for
you're cutting out. We can't hear you. Uh-oh, he froze. Looks like you froze, Member Donnelly. If you can hear us, maybe you can call me.
To hire drivers. Okay, can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Now we don't. We'll call you.
Dr. Fixer.
Yeah, you're breaking up, Member Donnelly. Can you type it in the chat? Or I can try calling you. Okay, he'll type it in the chat. Thank you. We'll get back to it. Sorry. Any other questions from board members? Seeing none? Right. We're ready for your second part.
All right, so we will go ahead and proceed to our mental health and student support presentation, being led by Dr. Jenny Knutson, our Senior Director of Mental Health and Student Support and team.
You know, we should have left the tables up. Thank you. Welcome, guys.
Okay. We have a large entourage tonight because we have a lot to share with you. So, good evening, Superintendent Bryant, Board President Bellamy, and board members. I'm Jenny Knutson, the Senior Director of Mental Health and Student Supports, and I am joined tonight by an exceptional team. And so I want to introduce the team that we have here. If you could raise your hand when I call your name. Kate McClellan, who's our Director of Student Supports, and will be tag teaming with me on some of this. We have Sarah Dykstra, Assistant Director of SEL and Behavior Supports. Kathy Bell, Director of Healthcare Services. Linda Self, School Psychologist Lead. Diana Carter, Elementary School Counseling Lead. And Jessica Williams, Secondary School Counselor Lead. So that is our team tonight. Tonight we're here to provide an update to the board about the progress of our integrated school mental health initiative. So next slide. According to the U.S. Surgeon General in 2007, 20% of children and youth were in need of mental health interventions, but only a third of those actually received support. And what's really interesting, of those who received support, 70% access that support through school settings. So schools are really a point of both access and outcomes for our mental health. So when students are healthy and they feel safe and supported, they're more likely to succeed in school and life, which is our mission here in ASD. This is our why in ASD. This is our why for providing integrated mental health services. So moving on to the next point is the board goal. Back a slide, thank you. Board Goal 4.0 is the foundation for really which we're building out a comprehensive school-based mental health system. So the guardrail addresses both our ASD's internal mental health supports and our community mental health partnerships. So the focus of our work as we move forward is to establish a comprehensive and integrated mental health model that is both equitable and culturally responsive to ASD students. So this really serves the what we're going to do, and we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. And then finally, this year, we're concentrating our efforts on the how. So we've talked about the why, the what, and the how for implementing our integrated system. In April, Kate and I introduced you to a framework that was called the Interconnected Systems Framework, or ISF. And this evidence-based approach is out of the National Center for School Mental Health in the University of Maryland. And this framework really helps schools and districts build a single system together that takes our school system and our community mental health to address the social, emotional, and behavioral needs of kids. And this framework is really what's going to guide the how as we move forward through this year. So today our team here is going to provide you an update on how we are building that school-based mental health system. So I'm going to turn it over to Kate.
So to start, again, I'm Caitlin McCollum, Director of Student Supports. And I think it's important that we highlight what we have undergone to really improve our community collaborations and supports. And at the core of all of this was to build collaborative partnerships and relationships that really usher forward that comprehensive school mental health program. And that started with really engaging our principals through work groups. And this was to gain an understanding of types of partnerships and create opportunity for feedback and two-way dialogue. So to start the process of building that common language and helping both our leaders in the schools and at the district level begin to align around common understanding of integrating our community partners. And then we also moved that on to kind of extend to our macro level partners, our systems level partners. We began engaging the Division of Behavioral Health and Optum, who is the administrative service organization for the state of Alaska's Medicaid system. And really that partnership was focused on sharing our vision and kind of our learning thus far and our desire to see a really comprehensive mental health program in ASD schools to improve outcomes, but then also to begin to float the idea of a partnership on how we can kind of undergo together this idea of a quality improvement initiative for our community and the state at large. And Optum was really a key partner in this dialogue in that they are also the administrative service organization in the state of Idaho, where they actually created a toolkit for schools in that community to help them learn and kind of the how-to of embedding mental health services in schools. So they were, we all engaged and just began the foundation of how do we look at a strategic partnership from both the state and municipal or district level. We also started more a consistent and intentional dialogue with our existing community partners, which are Providence, Alaska, VOA Alaska, and Alaska Behavioral Health through school-based health centers. And then they also have a partnership in some individual schools. And really the purpose of this monthly meeting was at its core to have a focus on systems integration. So building that intentional and scalable programming for a comprehensive mental health system. And again, that's really the merging of kind of our internal supports and our external community behavioral health supports. And that how is where it gets kind of sticky and confusing. And so for all of us to work through together. So in these meetings, we really have created a two-way dialogue where we're focusing on cross-systems learning, how we're resolving issues and barriers maybe that are coming up consistently or not able to be resolved at the school level and placing a burden on the schools. How can we lift that off their plate and begin addressing it at a different setting so we can provide the solutions to schools to more effectively and efficiently provide the supports to students. It's also about coordinating across providers. So we have 3 providers, different entities in our schools so that they can collaborate amongst each other and also across systems. It's also about sharing work around funding and sustainability. We will talk a lot more about this in the months to come, but really for us to begin aligning around shared asks, how we can support each other. It's important to make sure that this work is sustainable, ongoing, and that's going to take all of us coming together. And also around aligning for data needs, priorities, collection, and analyzing. The school district has a lot of data at its fingertips, and our community partners do as well. So it's really about looking at data, how are we analyzing it and choosing what best supports us understanding outcomes and moving from this idea of kind of a process-based metric where we're looking at, hey, we provide this many services or this many screening to more a functional-based data analysis. So how are we looking at life domain improvement, functional well-being, satisfaction in their schools, and how are we joining in those outcomes together and looking at the same data? So really sharing in outcomes and data and goals together. And then it was also to facilitate strategic connections. The district is a large entity, and so we want to make sure that they have an easier way to navigate to support them that's not left on the school principals or other providers within the school. So being able to facilitate that for them. And then also with external partners as well. We all bring a different lens and experience to the table, so being able to share in that and connect each other to best support the work moving forward. The next thing we've done is really focused on our committees and really refining and engaging our committees. I'm sorry, I skipped one. So I'm down at that last bullet point, but really focusing on refining and defining our committees that are going to oversee and execute this work. And one committee, it's going to be a standing committee, is really going to be our advisory committee. So that's going to include national, state, and local experts and stakeholders that are unique to school mental health or who have a stake in school mental health, who can really push this forward at a systems level. So there's a lot of statutes and regulations over both behavioral health and educational systems. How are we bringing those systems together to begin collaborating and troubleshooting how we can make this work long-term and into the future, really change the way of how we approach mental health, both as a community and as a state. The next was a steering committee. And our steering committee really held a unique intention that we wanted it to be representative of not only the community it serves, but of that includes staff and partners. So the vision was to have a diverse representation of educational staff. So equity, teachers, counselors, psychs, directors, principals, and then on the community side, that would be more of our community behavioral health partners, our students, our families, and other key community partners. And really, they were going to be the vehicle by which we created mechanisms and systems and tried to organize and execute or delegate the work to be executed. And through our learning and in talking with other states and districts who have gone through this process, they really helped us share that you need to take that intention and embed it into everything you do. Seems simple, but it took us a little while to get there. And so really we've evolved that idea to taking it and saying, how do we make sure that team exists at the school level? At the school leadership level, at kind of a cohort level. So our secondary and our elementary level. And then as you get to the district building, our district teams and an executive leadership team. So really taking that idea of teaming that's going to occur at multiple levels and aligning our initiatives and data and systems to create kind of an efficient and transparent process. And last but not least, we did expand through our partners. They were able to secure independent funding to expand into 4 ASD schools. That would be Clark through Alaska Behavioral Health, Tudor through Providence, and then Northwood and Russian Jack are looking at a partnership through Volunteers of America, Alaska.
Thank you, Kate. So that was the community mental health part. And then simultaneously, we're really working within our internal resources to build and develop our mental health services. And the first step in doing that was to really coordinate all of these services into a new department, the Mental Health and Student Supports Department, which was officially formed on July 1st. So we're new. And this department brings together healthcare services, nursing, school psychology, elementary counseling, positive behavior intervention supports, crisis response, all of those things under one department so that we can really align those systems and work collaboratively with our community partners to move forward in the schools. Really, the Mental Health and Student Supports Department works collaboratively with students, educators, administrators, families, and community partners to support the physical, the social, the emotional, and the behavioral well-being for every kid with the goal of them achieving and learning in school. We do this by providing interventions, counseling services, intervention supports, professional development for staff, resources and technical assistance to help problem solve. And we do that within a multi-tiered system of support. So just like you hear that multi-tiered system of support for academics, we're paralleling that with our behavior and social emotional learning. So we're using a similar system. Last June, we brought together all of our practitioners internally and we had them really look at what are their roles across our tiers of support in a multi-tiered system of support. And tonight, what we're going to do, instead of just hearing me and Kate talk about it, we've invited them here to be able to tell you what they do so you know what the resources are internally. You're going to hear from school psychology, counseling, and nursing. But to start with, we're going to have Sarah Dykstra really provide a high-level overview for you of positive behavior intervention supports, or PBIS. And you'll be hearing more about this as we go through the year. This is really essential to have in place to do an ISF framework and to integrate mental health. They go together. And so that's what we're really working on. So following Sarah, you're going to hear from our other practitioners to be able to share with you the things they do within a tiered system of support. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah right now.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So positive behavior intervention supports is an evidence-based 3-tiered framework for supporting students' behavioral, social, and emotional needs. And it's the approach that we use here in ASD to promote school safety and positive behavior, which creates the conditions for learning in schools. Tier 1 is what we as staff do school-wide for all students in the building. This includes active leadership teams that establish, teach, and monitor those consistent expectations school-wide to ensure school safety and a positive climate. And in classrooms, we use evidence-based classroom management strategies to create a positive and structured learning environments that are really conducive to learning. We teach social emotional learning curriculum based on our SEL standards, and we use data to make decisions at that school and classroom level. For some students, they're going to need a little bit more through our Tier 2 interventions. In our framework, this means we provide interventions, often in small groups, to address their social, emotional, or behavioral needs. We also know that because supporting students with behavioral concerns can be exhausting and sometimes overwhelming, that we really have to have systems in place for teacher support and teacher problem solving, and that's crucial at this level as well. And we use progress monitoring with data which supports that decision making and allows staff to make objective decisions about what students might need. And then finally, we have a few students who will need the Tier 3 intensive intervention supports. And this involves usually a team creating an individualized behavior plan to support that student's needs. This might be done through special education, but not always. This could include counseling, wraparound supports that connects the school, family, and community systems, and crisis intervention. And we use really frequent data collection at this level to ensure student progress.
Okay, now we're going to talk more specifically about specific services and start with school counseling.
All right, thanks everybody. This is our school counseling team. I'm Jessica Williams, and I represent secondary school counseling, so 7 through 12. We currently have 81 school counselors at the secondary school level with 2 vacant positions at this time. And Diana.
Good evening. My name is Diana Carter. I'm the elementary school counseling lead, and I wanted to provide some numbers for you that I thought were really impactful. We have 59 elementary schools in the Anchorage School District. 12 schools have full-time counselors. That's 20%. We have 27 schools that have a half-time counselor. That's 46%. And we have 20 schools that have 0 counseling. And that is 34% of our schools, and our children are going without that service.
One more mention as well about secondary school counseling. Our average ratio for a counselor to student is about 300 to 1, give or take certain school sites that might have a little bit of a difference in that. So just a comparison to something like what we think of the Anchorage Fire Department, where we want our teams present to be able to assist people in crisis. That is much the role that school counselors have carried over many, many years. But rather than fighting fires, I think we would rather see our fire department working on prevention, doing building checks and educating people on fire safety. And that is exactly what school counselors would prefer to be doing for most of their time. So in the Tier 1 MTSS world, school counselors serve as that pivot point between the students' academic experience with their teachers and in their classroom environment. Tier 1, we serve all students in the Anchorage School District to the best of our ability to provide that support to make sure that they're able to move through their academics to the best of their ability. Many school counselors have teaching degrees and get a school counseling degree as their master's program. So they're very familiar with that experience in the classroom and how to support teachers and students. At the elementary level and the younger grades, this might look like SEL kind of classroom lessons or SEL supports throughout the school building. And then at the secondary level, that would look maybe like college and career life planning class so that their academics experience will be successful. And this is where we, in our profession and per the American School Counseling Association national model, we'll be spending most of our time, and that is what we were working towards in our district to maintain. And then Diana is going to share a little bit about the Tier 2 and Tier 3 levels, which are the levels that we try to work through in prevention so that we don't have to spend too much time there. But thankfully, we have a support team to help with those wraparound services for our students.
Thank you. So our tier 2 are targeted interventions. So as we're moving up in intensity with students, those type of interventions in a counseling world look like small groups. So anger management, grief groups, things like that. They can be our check-in and check-out times with kids. Those are attendance interventions, parent support and education, referrals to on-campus supports, as well as conflict resolution. And then as we keep moving up our tier 3, which is our individualized student interventions, those look like the one-to-one short-term solution-focused counseling, crisis intervention, referrals to our outside mental health agencies, as well as collaboration with our community mental health providers that are in the schools, suicide screening and safety planning with students, as well as OCS reporting.
Thank you, counseling team. I'm going to turn it over to Linda Self to talk about school psychology services.
Good evening. My name is Linda Self, and I am the district school psychology instructional lead, as well as the school psychologist that services Baxter Elementary. Go Bobcats. So every school and program in our district is supported by one of our 47 school psychologists or one of our 6 school psychology interns. So I just want to take a second to talk a little bit about our school psychology interns. Alaska is one of the 3 states in our nation that does not have a school psychology program. So we really rely on our internship program. We put a lot of effort and time into our school psychology internship program to make it very robust and very appealable to our interns down in the lower 48 to come up. And so we actually that has really paid off for us. We have, of our 47 school psychologists, half of them actually interned with us. So it's been a great recruitment strategy for us. So looking at the services that school psychologists provide, some of our universal supports include consulting on that school-wide mental health services, as well as that PBIS initiatives at the school level that Sarah talked a little bit about. We engage with school teams in database decision-making around both academics and behavior, and we do serve on our building leadership teams. Our 2-tier supports do become more targeted as we engage with staff and families in supporting those diverse learning and behavior needs of our students. And so our school psychologists are active partners in that collaborative problem-solving process. And as part of that, we are developing those academic and those behavioral interventions for students. And then finally, at that 3rd tier of service delivery, we support our students with our greatest needs. We do those comprehensive evaluations for special education services. We develop those individualized behavior plans as a result of those functional behavior assessments. We provide direct counseling supports, and we complete safety risk assessments. As well, our school psychologists, in partnership with our school counselors, provide district-level crisis response to our school when they've been impacted by tragic events such as death of a student or of a staff member. So I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk about our work of our incredible school psychologists they do in our buildings every day.
Hi, I'm Kathy Bell, and I'm the Director of Healthcare Services, and I thank you all for being here tonight. I just wanted to tell you something about school nursing. So we currently have 90 BSN prepared school nurses that are allocated for our schools, and I want to emphasize the reason for the BSN. One is because they are have type Cs, like the teachers do, have type Bs or type As. Anyway, and they also have mental health preparation in their program, which is very, very important. Not all nursing programs have that. And I think that's very, very important right now with what's going on in our school districts. Of those 90 allocated positions, we have all but 2.5 filled. So there's only 2.5 that are unfilled at this time, and I'm very happy about that because that wasn't quite what it was at the beginning of the school year. We also have 12.75 health treatment nurses, and those are RNs and LPN positions that are not BSN prepared. And of those, we don't have all of them filled. We have 7.55 unfilled. We use those as support to backfill schools when nurses are out ill, when we don't have a subject fill. We also use them to support with some of our activities like screenings and immunizations. And we also use them in our larger schools, like the high schools that have populations of over 1,200 kids. And some of those schools really need a lot of extra help. In our tier 1, what we do is we collaborate with parents and staff on physical and mental health needs. We do referrals to health providers. We also provide individual health education, health screening, and immunization compliance. For tier 2, many school nurses have taken the mental health first aid class, and we're hoping to offer that again here this school year for the newer nurses that are coming on board. So we use those skills we've learned in that mental health first aid class in our practice as a school nurse. We also do CIT referrals, and as you all probably know, we offer lots and lots of emotional support to all students in the Anchorage School District. In the Tier 3 section, we also monitor students with complex health needs, collaborate on 504s and IEPs. We also want to make sure we have protected time for care coordination with our mental health specialists in our building with shared documentation systems. And we also do OCS mandated reporting. Thank you very much for allowing me to present this evening.
Great. So as you can see, the district has a really broad array and a lot of expertise brought to the table for mental health supports. And as somebody who came from the community side and sector, it was amazing to see the heart and the initiative and the drive and really the dedicated positions that work on student well-being and mental health day in and day out across all tiers. So what we've really had to translate is when we look at an interconnected systems framework and we're merging two systems, so our educational system and kind of our community mental health system, it's important to recognize that there's no replacing. That's about blending and weaving resources to better meet student needs. And this image right here was really an aha moment for us in helping depict what that looks like in a more kind of tangible and understandable way. So you heard a lot from our counselors and from Sarah about the district really being at tiers 1 and 2, being their primary focus. A lot of our district resources go into tiers 1 and 2. And if you think about that and you quantify it, estimations are about 80 to 90% of our students' needs are met through tier 1 services. When we go up to tier 2, about 5 to 10% of student needs are met through tier 2 services. And then when we move up even further into tier 3, that's about 1 to 5. Those are estimations and really vary depending on school and post-pandemic. I'd be interested to see if that changed nationally. And so really it's about then where do our community partners come in? We operate from the lens of our scope of expertise is really in that prevention and early intervention, and our targeted and intensive services really come from our specialized supports. Our community partners are almost flipped. They're really bringing in their intensive and individualized supports and entering from that tier 3 lens. That's the expertise they bring. They're the only provider in the school that can offer psychotherapy. That said, we know that their knowledge, their experience, their training can complement what's happening in the school. So you go down to tier 2 and you see that they can also offer individual supports. And those can include things like mental health topic groups, short-term interventions, mental health consultations. So as our counselors are providing groups, they might be able to go to our community partners and ask for advice, or, hey, can you share this lens with me? Or they might make a collaborative decision together to say, hey, you might be better fit to provide this group for this population of students, and really make those decisions together. And then you go down to tier 1 and you can see that their supportive services are almost flipped. So maybe 1 to 5% of their time is really spent in that tier 1 area. And for them, that's really participating in those leadership teams and providing their lens, their scope of expertise to influence and help support those universal supports across the school. It's also training on mental health topics, support to staff, and really kind of building that idea of mental health ambassadors across our schools. And so really, as we consider this across all levels, it's important to understand this is an outline. This is kind of a baseline for our schools, but every school is going to take this and individualize it to their needs. So those teams that our crew or our team all discussed today are really where they're reviewing data and making decisions on how they allocate resources across those tiers. So for a tier 2, where you can see there's pretty significant overlap, they're using data within their existing teams in the schools to decide who's best to support the needs of the students at those tiers.
Okay, so moving on to next steps. Where are we going from here? So the big thing I know you guys are wondering about is what are we doing with the $5 million? So in this area, we really have a plan, a solid plan to focus on and utilize 2.5 of that $5 million over the next 2 years. And that is really to build comprehensive mental health system. This is going to address guardrail 4.1 and include in really increasing mental health providers within. So increasing those counselors that you heard that we don't have at all schools, but also guardrail 4.2, continuing to expand those community partners. We're going to come at it from both perspectives and really work on how we better support schools. The other way that we're other funding, because we're really about blending and braiding funding, that's the only way we're going to be able to sustain this, is looking at funding like Title IV, which is really targeted for improving school conditions for student learning, and that includes mental health. So currently we're looking at spending those funds on professional development. Kathy talked about youth mental health first aid. That's helping teachers and staff really understand and look for the signs and be able to know how to refer and those types of things, as well as professional development and technical supports on classroom management and PBIS.
And then as Jenny talked about kind of blending and braiding funding, Project Aware is a new federal funding opportunity that has come out specifically supporting mental health efforts in the schools. We will be pursuing that and have been in active conversation with our community partners and internally about this project. And one of the unique things about this project is, as a local education agency, we are required as part of this project to partner with both the Division of Behavioral Health and the Department of Education and Early Development. And regardless of award, we plan to really build intentional and collaborative relationships with these entities. But again, we're looking for that diversified funding that can really support this work into the future. And that's a 4-year project. An additional next step is really forming those advisory and leadership teams kind of at all levels of the district that we talked about earlier, kind of codifying what those look like and really supporting implementation both at the district level and within our schools. And then last but not least, developing a 4-year implementation plan. Systems change is complex and long-term. So while we have 11 and now soon to be 14 pilot schools for this idea of interconnected systems framework, we still have, 100 plus schools to go. So the 4-year implementation plan will really focus on that foundation that Jenny talked about, fidelity to positive behavior intervention supports and multi-tiered systems of support, making sure our schools feel confident and equipped to have those operating well within their system or within their schools, so that those systems can support our community partners coming in and really supporting students across all levels. It'll also include kind of professional development. What do people need to know and be equipped with to do the work that we're all discussing here? And then a sort of mental health awareness campaign, embedding mental health and really elaborating its focus within the school system could really change the way mental health is viewed in the generations to come. And it is a basic right. It is a basic need. We should view it right alongside physical well-being. So we have an opportunity here to really help people understand that it's okay not to be okay and ask for help. And so really kind of focusing on mental health awareness. And then last but not least, really formalizing and streamlining efforts for crisis response, screening and early identification of student needs. It's really easy to see who has needs if they have externalizing behaviors, so issues in the class performance, but we really want to make sure we're identifying those kids who might be internalizing hurt or pain or struggling that's harder to recognize on the outside. And then expanding our integrated sites. Our goal will really to have a district-wide interconnected systems framework. And so that really wraps up our 4-year implementation plan. And I think there's been a lot of learning over these last few months, and there's a lot of learning and a lot of work to go. So I'll turn it over to Jenny to see if she has any closing remarks before we say thank you for your time tonight.
No other closing remarks unless there's any questions.
Wow. Thank you, guys. I see Member Jacobs. He's got his mic on. So why don't you kick us off?
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, team, really awesome, a lot to be excited about. So thank you so much for all the hard work that's got us to this point, and I'm looking forward to keeping track as to how things go in the months and years to come. Do we have a sense as to how many students are taking advantage of the Tier 1, 2, and 3 services that we're offering respectively?
Well, Tier 1 is for all, so it'd be school-wide systems and supports, but we don't have data right now specifically around Tier 2 and Tier 3, but we could look into kind of rough estimates. We can look into that for especially our community partners and number of kids served and stuff.
I've got a few questions. But
okay, you can ask one more.
Just one more right now? Okay, yeah.
We'll come back.
I snuck a few questions in earlier, so I'm on a short leash. Okay, yeah, fair enough. So I guess I'll speak to earlier. Well, I'll go with the last one. So next steps with revenue. Ms. McClelland, I think we talked over the summer about the municipality and their pursuit of mental health first responders and looking at the possibility of like billing Medicaid or thinking outside the box in terms of revenue. Is that something we're still considering? Is it a viable path to support some of this work?
Yeah, billing Medicaid is definitely something that we are looking into. That's a large and complex system. And so that would be kind of a multi-year planning, but it's definitely something that we are exploring.
Okay. Member Higgins?
Just a couple of comments, and I appreciate everything you do. I remember a number of years ago when it came to school safety, that counselors was considered to be by the professionals much more important than the SROs of it. I mean, you've got to identify the kids at risk. You need to do the intervention in order to keep the school safe. So when we look at what we allocate and what we have to do, safety is a high priority. So I really appreciate what you do with that. As far as the SEL, I always like to at least make sure the public knows we're talking about social emotional learning. Not everybody knows all of our little letters out there that within it, but I recognize the impact that has on academics. And it has a significant one. A number of years ago, Anchorage School District won a national award for the SEL because of its relationship to the importance of the schools and how well we were doing. And I appreciate the role you play in that one too. That's as we look at academic achievement, that's got to be, don't throw out what is working when you're trying to find out what needs to work with it. So I do appreciate everything you do, and I appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Higgins. Member Holloman?
I have two sort of general ask and not an immediate response, but in the long term. This does seem like something we're starting to coordinate and be much more purposeful about. And I'll confess to some degree, I'm like a lot of the general public, in that when you say school counselor, kids go talk to them. I don't know what they do that much. I have a pretty good idea of how they spend a lot of time. But one would just be documenting some of the activities and interventions enough so that when we're talking to the public and we're talking to legislators, we can sound intelligent about it and say things to them that they grasp and really mean something. We love to sound intelligent if people will give us enough information. But as it becomes more concrete, because I think one of the things you're doing in coordinating all this is kind of standardizing and putting things into language, and to be able to talk about the number of kids that you directly impact and in what ways will help us explain that in one more way, schools are doing a lot more than math and reading. And it costs money and we have to fund it if we want it to work well. The other thing would be to try to develop a list that's not a total wish list, but where we fall short in being able to do the basic job that you're setting out to do. The fact we have 30 elementary schools roughly that don't have a counselor is a real concrete thing that we can talk to people about and go, here's a group of kids that barely get any service at all in this particular area. And I would think as you begin to do these things, you'll you'll run into things like that. And I mean, I think the education system's sort of built on it. I mean, ultimately, as a classroom teacher, you have what you have, and you know there's some things that you could do more with, and you also know there's no chance. And so sometimes we just don't ask. But I do hope that periodically you'll come back to say, this is a gap we've got. This is something where we've identified this many kids or this segment of our population that needs this, and we don't have a resource to send them to. We don't have the resources internally to deal with it. But I do appreciate much the work you're doing. It is probably long overdue in terms of doing it in a very purposeful way. And it does ultimately impact learning for a huge amount of kids, not just the kids you directly work with, but the ones that sit next to them. So thank you much, and it's been very informative.
Member Lessons?
I don't want to be a curmudgeon. I appreciate all of you and the Herculean work that you're doing, but I wonder whether, I won't say whether the board has failed you, but I should just say that I'm not sure that we have a definition of mental health. Is it personnel-based Band-Aid approaches, the tier 3? I mean, I know you're talking about tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, but I don't want to see schools just becoming oriented towards that sort of siloed endpoint. Right? If we have a disease, I don't want to be treating just the disease at the end stage, right? I want us to be working proactively to promote student well-being overall. And you guys have a lot of tools in your tool bags that you're working on in partnerships. But I think that we have got to tackle some of the structures. And I'm going to come back to school start times, because there is a lot of really excellent evidence to show that changing our school start times is going to diminish student depression, anxiety, sleeplessness, the things that I think that we're actually talking about that are like within this umbrella of mental health. So I would like to see the board, the administration, really think about not just how do we partner with other organizations, because it's great to tap into their resources and bodies of knowledge, but how can we structure our schools at a holistic level, down to the playgrounds, right? We've talked about our playgrounds, and I'm thinking about the Lake Otis playground that was on the bond that failed, right? It doesn't have lights. It has a wooden playground. So the families can't come and play there when it's dark in the winter. Would those families' relationships with the students' well-being, with more time, with additional access to that space, would that help mental health through an investment in infrastructure, in lights, and a playground? So that's what I want us to do, is to think not just about partnerships with VOA and Providence and Alaska Behavioral Health. And I think that probably the Alaska Native Health Center should be part of that discussion, but that's just my own thought. But really, we need to think bigger about what it means to promote student wellness overall. And so that's kind of my curmudgeonly comment for the evening.
No, but I absolutely agree. I think systemically identifying what it is that we're doing and the environments that we are creating. What is that? How does that impact learning? How does that impact how the services that we provide? So I am excited. I think seeing all of the different, I mean, you're not siloed anymore. You are coordinating and working together. For me, that's a big plus. Usually we only hear from counselors or psychologists or nursing, and you're all doing your own thing. So coming to get this reorganization was absolutely needed and necessary. Shall we try member Donnelly again? You want to try talking again, Mr. Donnelly?
Madam President, I didn't have any questions at this time. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we can come back to you, member Jacobs.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a couple more. We talked about how there's a shortage specifically of elementary school counselors. does that leave referrals for tier 2 and 3 supports to a school nurse or to teachers? How are those students getting into the MTSS model?
Do you want to talk to them? Yeah.
Yes, it really does. I think this one. Oh, I think it's on now. There we go. Yeah, at an elementary school, some of our elementary schools, we were just at one today that has a plethora of supports around mental health and student services. And it's really nice to see, but there are many, many schools that have almost zero supports. They may have a psych intern and that's it. And so those issues and those services do fall onto the people that are there. That's typically a nurse, and the principals, the admin team, instructional coaches sometimes, and just those teachers who have just kind of taken upon themselves to really swoop in and wrap around kids. So that is a problem as this is a targeted service that we want to provide for kids that we've identified. And then of course, speaking to you, that we do want to have all of the kids connected to school and making sure that we're hitting all those tier 1, the whole school, as making as schools as much of a community for parents and caregivers and everybody to go to. And once you are connected to a school, we know that we have less behavioral problems, we have less mental health problems. It's all about connection and just being part of that community of your school.
I also want to add that for the referral system that we do, school counselors do have a type C license with the state of Alaska, as well as nurses, and principals fall into that category as well. So when we're talking about referrals, we do in our profession have legal and ethical responsibilities for that, but we also have our responsibilities with the Alaska statute with how we refer students onto our community mental health resources. And so that does limit some, a teacher per se to give referrals to, maybe tier 2, tier 3 services.
We also do have a number of other just behavioral specialists and behavioral positions in schools. A lot of times mental health or other needs manifests itself as behavior problems in schools. And so some of our schools have been creative with using a teacher level position to, be a behavior specialist, to kind of be a behavior coach for teachers, build capacity. They do a lot of teaming. We also have a B team through special education that's kind of a more intensive, highly trained, who works specifically individually with kids. So we have a variety of other positions that also support schools in meeting the behavior needs of kids that might not necessarily fall under any of these specific positions.
But if I can add to that too, right now with some of the issues in staffing and special education, we do have situations that we're problem solving with schools whereby they may have the staff to do it, but we don't have the resources to push in and help them develop those plans or collect the data to really hone in on what the issue is, or vice versa. We've developed a plan that's really perfect for the kid and we want to implement, but we don't have the staff to implement it. So right now, staffing is creating a huge complication in being able to provide services or equitable services across all the district. And that's not only ASD, I know that's around the country, but it is a real issue that will impact this work.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add, our schools are really resilient. So they've found ways to make things work to support the students. And what we're talking about here is quality improvement. There's a level of quality at every single school, but we're all acknowledging that what the school can provide and what our community mental health partners can provide still isn't enough. So we've got to think innovatively about how we're addressing student need. And that extends to the point of, in those meetings, how are we looking at a school level and at an executive level at community data around parks and larger community connectedness. All of those things in the long term come into play. And so ISF isn't fully formed. We're exploring and initially implementing. And that's really that point, so that schools don't, the idea is to take the foundations that they've built and build off them and work in what they've really honed in well. Even with our schools that are implementing sites, we aren't going in there and being like, this is ISF and this is how you do it. We're saying what's working well. We don't want to fix that. If it's supporting students, here's some opportunities. Sarah is really, has a lot of knowledge around PBIS and structures. Do you guys have any questions there? So it's about really reinforcing and building on the quality that exists in schools in the direction of ISF, which is evidence-based and we know will help produce results.
Got one more, Carl?
I do.
Okay.
Madam President, and I'll combine it into two more before Madam President throws her gavel at me.
Where's my gavel?
Strategically placed. All right. So two last funding questions. We talked, I think that you folks talked about how you're proposing to use 2.5 million over the next 2 years of the 5 million the board allocated. Are you informally giving the board the green light to consider that 2.5 million to address our $68 million shortfall? And then an easier question, because it doesn't pertain to money that we have. We talked about expansion into 4 additional schools. The Assembly appropriated 1.9 million from their ARPA funding to community partners. Is that where that went, or did that go somewhere else? Do we know?
So on your first question, I am deferring to Superintendent Bryant on that.
Yes. So as we shared in the budget workshop this afternoon, looking at where ESSER funds are allocated and how we can use that towards the deficit is an upcoming topic.
And for the second one, I'll let Kate address that a little bit.
And can you repeat? I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly.
Yep. So the Assembly, as part of their ARPA package, allocated 1.9 million. I think it was to Alaska Behavioral Health, VOA, and others. I'm wondering if that lines up with the Clark, Tudor, Northwood, Russian Jack, or if because a question we get, and we probably should have this same presentation at a future joint meeting, is how do our services align with community partners, which align with what the Assembly tries to support? And so how all those three things intersect, I think would be a good conversation to have.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. We haven't gotten a clear rundown. VOA did have an additional ask. So while they were allocated funds, some of it was to support a program that was separate from school-based services. So they did get some for school-based services. And then yes, Alaska Behavioral Health and school-based health centers both received funding for school-based expansions. So I guess the short answer is yes. And that is part of our work together, is to really align around those topics and make sure that there's a lot of funding coming available for mental health supports, and we want to make sure that we're using it strategically for impact and we're not, overreaching or over asking, so to speak.
Okay. So the 2.5 million we'll be looking at adding on in addition to that.
And they will be giving a report to the joint meeting on Friday.
Yeah.
Member Wilson, do you have any questions at this time?
Primarily just a comment. I just want to also share that I appreciate all the work that you guys have done to enhance the mental health services for our students. And as Member Jacobs and I believe additional members have said, I look forward to seeing the data of the students that are receiving these services, how they're receiving the services. So I look forward to that future data as well.
Great, thank you. So seeing no more hands, I want to thank Dr. Knudsen, Kate, Sarah, Kathy, Linda, Diana, Jessica. Who did I miss? All right, thank you guys. Okay. Thank you very much. So now we're on item E, which is our public comment. And as you entered into the boardroom, there is a handout, a blue and white handout that really goes over the decorum expectations for our engagements in the boardroom. But we really want to welcome and thank you guys for being here. And this is our first opportunity of the evening for public comment. We set aside an hour at the beginning of the meeting for public comment. Any comments that we don't get to within the hour, we will hear at the second opportunity, which is at the end of our meeting. During public comment, board members will not answer questions or engage in discussion with members of the public. This is the public's time to speak and the board's time to listen. The board welcomes the public to observe and contribute to our meetings through their comments. However, to be productive, our meetings must be structured and civil. We conduct our meetings under Robert's Rules of Order, a set of rules for orderly meetings that have been used since the 1800s. Those rules require the board and the public to be civil and respectful of each other's opinions and statements. As the president of the board, it is my duty to enforce the rules of civility and decorum. As such, and consistent with Robert's Rules of Order, I have the authority to rule any speaker out of order for violation of these rules and or fail to conduct themselves in a civilly manner. So again, the handout is at the door, the table by the door rather. And with that, we will begin our testimony, our public comment hour with our student, Olivia Love. Welcome, Olivia.
Can I make a comment really quickly? Thank you for allowing Liv to speak, and we have to leave right after this because we have 6th grade camp. The bus leaving at 6 a.m. to Homer for 3 days. So forgive us.
Thank you. Whenever you're ready, Olivia.
Good evening. My name is Liv Love, and I am in Midge Park's 6th grade class at Inlet View. I am speaking here because I would like to see Inlet View Elementary be replaced. It is beautiful and it has served us well, but the school hasn't changed since my mom, Rebecca Love, went there 30 years ago. The school has been put to good use, but has been greatly neglected, as the tiles in the intermediate hallways are being held together with cardboard and tape, and the lunchroom separate from the gym would also be nice. Replacing the school would be more efficient because we really need it, and it's just getting worse. For a matter of fact, the original school is going to have 2 floors, but the demand for schools in 1957 was really high, so they opened with only 1 floor. Since my mom was there 30 years ago, the only thing that hasn't changed is the roof. I also want my little sister Isabel, who's in 2nd grade, and my cousin Charlotte, who's in 5th grade, to have a great future at Inlet View School without more delay. I hope you consider my request for replacing Inlet View School without more delay. Thank you for letting me speak.
And thank you for coming. Thank you. Okay, next we have via phone, Danielle Kemp. Nope. Okay. We'll go next to Jenna Test. Jenna? It's Jenna Test in person. Not seeing Jenna. Let's try Clyde Carey in person. Welcome, Clyde. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Clyde Carey and I live on M Street right next to Inlet View Elementary, and I am here to express my support and promote the approval of funds for the construction of an Inlet View Elementary school replacement. As mentioned, my family and I live right next door to the school. I have 2 children that go to Inlet View, one's in kindergarten and the other's in 2nd grade. And my wife and I moved to the South Addition neighborhood specifically for the great and caring community, which also most definitely includes Inlet View Elementary. My wife and I had the option to enroll our children into one of the other great ASD optional school programs, but we chose to enroll our children into Inlet View because we believe that the amazing IB program is awesome and the school has an overall great reputation. I've lived in Anchorage my entire life. The many great schools that we have here is a great perk for Anchorage. I personally attended Clad Elementary, Mears, Diamond, and then UAA. And now I run my own business and I'm raising my family here. The talks of potentially closing the school and possibly not funding the Inlet View Elementary School replacement has me worried about my family's future here. A huge benefit of living in Anchorage is you can basically live in any neighborhood in town and have access to a great school that will be nearby. This makes it an easy decision for my wife and I to choose to raise our families here in Anchorage. Right now, I know that Anchorage is full of opportunity and has a great education, options for families. If the Inlet View Elementary replacement project is not funded, then my sense of security and positivity for Anchorage will be damaged. We know that there's many great reasons why the school needs to be replaced. The student safety inside and outside the building, overall modernization, its high maintenance needs, and overall enrollment, over-enrollment, and more. As a resident living adjacent to Inlet View Elementary, I fully support the project and its current design approved by the city's Urban Design Commission. And for the sake of our city and neighborhood and education system, I encourage the Anchorage School Board to approve the project as is and allocate the assets needed or funds needed to complete it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next, via phone, we have Olivia Emery. It's *6 to unmute, Olivia.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Olivia Emery, as you said. Thank
yes,
you.
We hear you.
My daughter is a student. Thank you. My daughter is a student at Lake Otis Elementary. I am calling in about the resolution to require education on secure storage of firearms to prevent gun violence in schools and at home by using the Be Smart program. Be Smart is an excellent program that I think would greatly benefit ASD families like mine. I think we can all agree that the safety of our students is important, and studies show following safe and secure firearms reduces risk of unintentional firearm injuries among children by 85%. Guns are the leading cause of death in children and teens in Alaska. An average of 22 children a year are killed due to firearm mortality, and 59% of those deaths are caused by gun suicide. In 2019, nearly half of high school students, 48.9% to be exact, reported they could easily access a loaded gun, and 1/4 of high school students, 25.3%, reported seriously considering suicide. Securely storing firearms has proven to combat these figures and reduce harm. These are affordable and easy solutions that still allow gun owners to quickly and easily access their guns for protection. I strongly believe this program would greatly improve the safety and security of students and families, and I strongly support the resolution to be passed. Thank you for your time.
And thank you, Ms. Emery. Next in person, we have Virginia Limbo. Welcome, Virginia. You have 3 minutes when you're ready. Bonnie? Okay.
Is it all right if I stand?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. After the school bond failed, the legislature appropriated almost $100 million, which can be used immediately for capital improvements. Why spend $30 million on the Inlet View replacement? These are the reasons. 1, the other schools on the bond have one need: structural and seismic code compliance, or roof replacement or repair, or upgrades on safe vestibules and installation of state-of-the-art security features, or furnace replacement. Whereas Inlet View has all of those needs and more. It lacks a sprinkler system, the plumbing leaks raw sewage water onto the playground and inside the building. At times, the drinking water is not potable. And unlike newer schools on the bond proposition, the physical plant of Inlet View does not meet school district educational requirements. Number 2, Ives replacement is one of the highest capital priorities of the Anchorage School District. In its 2014 to 15 assessment, the district found Ives to be the school most in need of repair. In the 2018-19 assessment, the condition of the school had deteriorated and it was cheaper to replace than to renovate. Ongoing repairs will continue to drain the district's operating budget. 3, of the different ways you could spend the money from the legislature, using it to fund a project that would otherwise have to be paid by a bond is a form of tax relief. Real property taxes would not contain a bond assessment of principal and interest. Do not ignore the impact on our local community of the good jobs this construction project will create. 4, 2 of our legislators, Zach Fields and Tom Begich, wrote to you specifically asking you to fully fund the project. The petitions in support, the green dot map, and the stunning margin of 67% in favor of the bond proposition in precincts in the Ives attendance zone demonstrate that there is wide and solid public support for this project. 5, what kind of community is Inlet View? Enrollment is always up to or over capacity. It is racially and ethnically diverse as Anchorage as a whole, and it is more economically diverse. In the city as a whole, 33% of households have an annual income less than $50,000 per year. In the Inlet View attendance boundary, 52 to 53% of households have an annual income less than $50,000. Inlet View is a success. It is one of the highest performing schools in the district. We are the only elementary international baccalaureate school in the district. This week, my grandson and his entire 4th grade class are going on an overnight field trip to Bible Victory Camp for fun and educational activities like the Fossil Walk. Last year, a child found a trilobite. The PTA raises money to pay all of the costs for children whose families cannot afford to pay. So the whole 4th grade class goes, even the poor children. Please don't punish success. Allocate all the money we need now to build our new school. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Next, we have Mary Geddes in person. Mary? Welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Mary Geddes. I live on N Street. I wish to speak to the proposal to allocate ASD funds to an Inlet View rebuild. My husband and I are very close neighbors of Inlet View Elementary, so close we're just one house away from the school lot. We've been in our home for decades. Well, we no longer have young children at home. As nearby property owners and as actual neighbors of the school, we wish to weigh in on the proposal to allocate the funds for the school's planned rebuild. We attended multiple UDC hearings on the school rebuild plan. Frankly, we were shocked at the specifics of the building's deterioration, as detailed by former teachers and Inlet View students themselves. It's not just outdated and crowded, it's worse. It's unsafe. Clearly, action is needed. The UDC's painstaking consideration and approval of the rebuild plan is a green light, and prioritization of the Inlet View rebuild is in order. We think that Board Member Jacobs and Lesson's proposal to allocate funds for the Inlet View rebuild reflects that priority, and we urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Petra Wilm. Welcome.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Petra Wilm. I'm an Inlet View Elementary parent for the 9th year in a row, my last year as a parent, my tenure. And I know you've all seen me before. I don't want to make light of serious mental health issues, but I know a way that you can improve the mental health of at least 240 kids, all of their parents and caregivers, all of the staff, and many of the neighbors living around the school. I just want to say that these kids and teachers are closer than ever to finally getting the replacement school that they need. And I think that you are the school board to get the job done. I'm going to thank you in advance for thinking creatively about how to do this. If ASD has the funds to get this project going now, please don't put this project in its entirety on another bond. If ASD's post-bond survey revealed that the public wants to vote for smaller bonds with furnace replacements and roof replacements and security vestibules in this political and economic climate, then leverage that information and propose a bond that they can easily vote yes for. Use the state provided bond. Am I fading out?
No.
Okay. Use the state provided bond debt reimbursement funding to take care of this larger project now. Makes no sense when you have a serious problem right now. And if you're worried about spending a large amount on one project, then you have to please let us know when you think this decision to fund this project will become easier as the price is increasing every year. I am predicting that'll never happen. Please don't pass the buck and condemn the school to death by 1,000 cuts. Thank you for making hard but informed choices with the long view in mind.
Thank you very much. Next, we have, I think, is it Lisa Foster? Lisa Foster. Lisa? Okay. Welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Lisa Foster, an ASD parent, volunteer, noon duty, traffic, crossing guard, and a substitute. I'm here to ask you to readdress and simply not approve ASD memo number 27, the education and safe and secure storage of firearms. At the outset, the memo looks like an altruistic attempt to help out the students of ASD. Unfortunately, as you go more in depth, it's ill-advised with the current budgetary constraints and seems to be overstepping the boundaries of the educational process and further does not go into the underlying issues. First, for all of us who've been involved in statistics and gleaning information from those statistics, there are fallacies in drawing conclusions and establishing requirements from those results. They don't delve into the underlying reasons and root causes of those issues. However, the tendency is to overreact and create requirements that do virtually nothing except establish another job or increase paperwork for already overburdened people. This directive is tagging the means and not underlying causes nor motive behind the issue of deaths related to firearms. Next, the memorandum requires an education process on the safe and secure storage of firearms. From my understanding of ASD health curriculum, students are already being taught about firearm safety and dangers inherent with those weapons. There's several drills, ALICE drills, and other drills that target this as well. Students in ASD are typically under 18 years old, and Alaska state law restricts firearm sales to those under 18. Therefore, who exactly is the target of this education? If the students are in fact being taught about firearm safety and they legally have no control over the firearm, it seems that ASD is overstepping the boundaries by providing education to the parents. Finally, ASD has a significant issue with a budget, as we've heard. This campaign to target parents who own guns is not fiscally responsible use of taxpayer money. So what you're doing is you're using my money to tell adults how to store their firearms in their houses. And doing that, you're also implicitly telling every one of us that you are more concerned about our own children than we are. Furthermore, you seem to be stating that you're more knowledgeable at how to protect myself and my kids. If you're truly interested in the kids, I urge you to reconsider the directive and search for the underlying causes of the problem. Simply seeking to limit the means is not a solution nor a step towards that solution. An individual who is targeting children and teens or anyone for that matter is mentally unstable and will find a way to accomplish their goals regardless of how safely and securely firearms are stored. So the safe and secure storage is not the issue, and spending time, money, and resources on the parents who own them is not the issue. A better way to use this money is to invest in our students' mental health and return to teaching the students overall respect and consideration for themselves and fellow human beings. Additionally, personal responsibility and consequences for inappropriate behavior should follow. So I ask you to look for the root causes of the problem and target that. We don't have to do something just because everyone else does it. I want to truly fix the issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Ranau Gruen. Oh, I'm sorry. How bad did I mess up?
I thought of changing my name when I came to this country, but I've not. Ranau Gruen.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So, dear ASD members, I zoomed into the budget work session on September 14th, and I left that meeting confused. I'm a medical doctor with a PhD in epidemiology, and I have concerns that the priority of ASD were not fully lined up with the proposed budgeting. And I know these are options which were discussed, but I heard priorities saying that keep schools where well-taught special programs are being operating, including language immersion programs, as well as the IB program, which is at Inlet View Elementary. I also heard as a priority, have safe schools for our kids. But then on the proposed budget, I saw options as pay back money to taxpayers, tax holidays and putting money aside for disaster funds. And I don't think that totally aligns with the priorities. If any, those options, they will cost money. Only banks will have real benefit for those options. The third option, putting money aside for a disaster fund, sounds very nice. But I think we're actually having a false sense of security. I would rather go with preventing a disease or a disaster to happen than respond when a disaster is happening. Right now at Inlet View Elementary, I can see a disaster happening if we delay any new build. Non-potable water and sewage on the playground can lead to many communicable diseases, including but totally not limited to cholera, hepatitis, and typhoid. There's no secure festival, as everybody knows already. There's no line for sight. And last year, a teen with a gun was heading to Inlet View Elementary. Luckily, the principal action was sufficient and APD responded adequately and the teen was intercepted before opening fires. Also, parking and traffic are currently a problem around the school. I hope never to witness and to respond as a doctor to a kid car collision. The new proposed school build has improved children drop-off in the planning. So what I'm saying, I don't want a disaster to happen. I think we should prevent this. The longer ASD delays the build of Inlet View Elementary, the greater the odds that a gun disaster can happen, that higher the odds that children will get ill from waterborne pathogens, and kids are exposed to chaotic traffic. Please fund Inlet View Elementary.
Thank you very much. Next in person, Rob Larkey. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
You have 3 minutes.
Let's see. Am I on? Okay. Thank you. I'm here to speak on behalf of all ASD students from the West, Romic, and even in the hockey community from the possible closure of the Dempsey Anderson Ice Arena and the Bamboki Ice Arena for the homeless shelters coming up. We talk about mental health. We talked about it a lot here today. We just come from a pandemic, and where else can we do SEL than an ice rink where it's taught every day? So we're closing this. We're actually, when we close these arenas, we're closing a classroom door. We're shutting it down. I'm coming to the school board today to ask you and Mr. Superintendent to write a letter to the municipality, the assembly, to tell them that they are shutting a classroom door down. We want to talk about academics. West High last year received the All Academic Award with a 3.83. Cumulative academic award. We won it 3 years in a row. That speaks highly of ourselves from players that have gone right now that are playing at USC, going to Arizona, Boston College, and other ones that have pursued other careers outside of that, TSA, that have came from West High of last year's seniors. So not only is it for high school, it's for the kids that are in kindergarten too. Their parents take them to the ice rink. They get to exercise their mind. They get to work as a team. They get to learn the ESL. They get to learn to get the mental health, the frustrations out, and learn to work as a team and actually push for their academics to succeed into that itself. So I'm asking you as a school board tonight to please, please, please take a moment after today and talk to each other, and please write that letter to the assembly. I'm looking to take probably a personal day tomorrow because I'm an ASD employee to go in front of the assembly and ask them every time when they run and they get going out for their elections, they always say that they care about the future of America or future of Alaska, the kids, and now they're going to shut a classroom door. Shame on them. Please step up and do something. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Next, we have Caroline Van Hemert. I'm sorry if I messed that up. Welcome.
Thank you. Very close. My name is Caroline Van Hemert, and I'm a parent of 2 children at Inlet View Elementary, 2 boys in 1st and 3rd grade. I'm also an alum of Inlet View, and like I think the first speaker can attest, the school has not changed in the 30 years since I attended in any fundamental ways. And there's some nostalgia, of course, to seeing everything as it once was, but it no longer meets the needs of the students. And I think all of the safety and security issues have been well articulated by others, but I would just like to reiterate the importance from a financial standpoint as well in investing now and not further delaying the decision and accruing additional costs, because they're very evident to anyone who walks onto the school premises as to the needs that the school currently has. And I will also just say that from the kids' perspective, they are really relying on us to get it right this time. Every student I've spoken to at Inlet View is not asking whether the grown-ups will fix the school, but when they will do it, because they trust that we will do what's right by them. And they've shown up enough times to these meetings, often late at night, and listened in and participated in the conversations that I hope that I realize there's very many difficult budgeting decisions, but Inlet View has been waiting for a long time to be replaced, and now is the time while there's the opportunity, and it's not going to get easier or cheaper if we wait. So thanks very much, and yeah, thanks for all the work you do.
And thank you very much. Next, we have Sean Fitzgerald. Welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Try to be quick. Hello to the Anchorage School Board and to Superintendent Bryant. My name is Shawnee Fitzgerald. I was born and raised in Anchorage, graduating in 1985 from East Anchorage High School. My husband and I have put 4 children through the Anchorage School District, with one currently attending West High. I'm here today to speak out regarding the Anchorage Assembly and the Task Force on Homelessness current plan of considering the use of Dempsey Anderson Ice Arena as an emergency homeless shelter. I cannot begin to tell you how strongly myself, fellow parents, and other Turnagain neighbors oppose this plan. I have received communication from some of the members here on this board who stated that the plan was not shared with the school board prior. I can certainly understand this, but still, I wish to go on record at this meeting, because even if the decision ultimately isn't up to you, I can't help but believe that the board has some influence with the assembly, the mayor's office, and the task force if this decision puts children in harm's way. If they all know how strongly the school board opposes this plan, then perhaps we can all defeat the short-sighted and ill-conceived plan. I have asked the question of the assembly to no response if any of them have actually walked the campuses of Dempsey, Romig, and West High. Well, I have hundreds, if not thousands of times through the years. Dempsey Anderson virtually sits on the campus of both of these schools. In the working document from the task force, they outline their concerns for proposing certain buildings over others. Besides Dempsey and others, they propose the Denina and the Egan Center, which they say the proximity is not optimal because of its downtown location. Sullivan Arena, which was used as a homeless shelter prior, isn't favorable because of its proximity to Chester Creek. If location is part of the evaluation criteria, then please somebody tell me and explain why putting a homeless shelter within feet of 2 schools and thousands of children is somehow a plan anyone would even consider. Not only do these schools occupied with literally thousands of children, the walking paths between the campuses and Dempsey are utilized every single day by these students. So somebody tell me, how is this a safe plan? They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, so I'd like to share a few with you quickly. Here is a picture of 3 students walking through Dempsey on their way back from lunch today. There were dozens more students around them, but I couldn't photograph them without capturing their faces, but there were many more around them. I witness this every day. This is a photo of Romig School and Dempsey. As you can see, they are literally attached, not by blocks, not by yards, but by feet. They are separated only by a chain link fence, which has to remain open because of easement and school buses. This photo shows the parking lot of Dempsey, and yes, those are active windows.
Your time is up, but thank you very much.
I would like to submit.
Sure. Next, we have, I know it's Robin. Is it Beckford? I can't read it. Petro? Huh? Okay, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Robin Pecroa, and I have been associated with classrooms for 40 years. I have a master's in curriculum and instruction. I also have a special ed endorsement. My major in college was British literature, and my minor is music. I'm here to talk about BP 6163.1, libraries and media centers. I quote, "The school board believes that school libraries have a responsibility to nurture intellectual growth and freedom by providing materials and information that support and enrich the curriculum." My question, do our current curriculums K through 8 provide intellectual growth and freedom on sexual identity? Furthermore, should a book that promotes, encourages being a transgender and all of its derivatives be on library shelves K through 8 with a specific target audience of 4th grade? The school board believes that the school libraries are there to support materials and information that will stimulate growth in factual knowledge, literary appreciation, aesthetic values, and ethical standards. Does the school board believe that a book that promotes subversive activities is ethical? Is it ethical to clear the browsing history on your mom's computer so that she won't know about your web searches? Is it ethical to deliberately lie to a parent? Does the school board believe that a book that promotes hormone-suppressing drugs, transitional surgery, as prescribed by a 4th grader to a fellow 4th grader, stimulates intellectual growth? How is the factual knowledge in the book of any value to a student? The information is delivered in a pedantic. You can take hormones so that your body, doesn't go all man-like. Does the school board believe that a book that promotes literary appreciation should be one that allows an author literary license so that the author can use voice to indoctrinate our students? That's not my words. That's someone who works at AP. The theme of gender identification is recurrent and central to the message of this book. How many parents will be happy to know that the district is allowing a 4th grader to teach another 4th grader about hormone suppression?
Thank you, ma'am. Your time is up. You may submit your comments, though, if you'd like. Okay. All right. Thank you. Next, we have Sandy Thompson Wallace. Welcome, Sandy. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, members of the school board, Dr. Bryant, and the ASD team. I'm Sandy Thompson Wallace, president of Totem Association of Educational Support Personnel, the largest support staff union within the Anchorage School District. We are the classroom paraprofessional educators, tutors, and the front office staff that includes administrative assistants, secretaries, and registrars in both buildings and departments. In October 2021, when Totem was still negotiating with the district for a successor contract, I came to you with a tale of numbers. At that time, Totem had 101 open classroom support positions and 16 open clerical positions for a total of 117. At that time, that number seemed huge, bigger than I ever remember seeing in my 25 years with the Anchorage School District. To my dismay, that number has only increased this past year. We are short-staffed as of today with 132 open positions, 118 in the classroom and 14 clerical. The situation has reached critical. I know that Totem isn't the only classified support bargaining group with shortages of employees. We've been hearing over and over the ads with the shortage of bus drivers for weeks, the shortages of student nutrition employees as well. There are large incentives for hiring into these positions up to $2,500. Each position within the district has value. However, these other two groups do not hold the educational impact that Totem does. With the shortage of clerical staff, supplies and curriculum do not get ordered for teachers, staff, and students. Sports and activities are impacted. Students do not get enrolled timely, in which impacts the monies the district receives from the state and muni. But the most impactful issue is with the lack of classroom support staff. And why do I say that? These are the staff that run WIN groups, prep material, cover the classroom and recess time. They are the part of the educational team that assists this district with meeting the needs of our students in the classroom, especially our special education students who have IEPs with requirements for the number of service hours that must be provided. I have staff across the district at every level working multiple jobs. They are covering classrooms as teacher, being the nurse, filling in as new duties, etc. It's also impacting safety. Paraeducators and office staff who are not getting breaks or lunches, paras having to toilet students alone, student staff ratios not being met for everyone's safety. What is the solution? I don't have the answer for that. I do know that the district has lost a tremendous amount of employees over this last year, not just because of retirement. Today, we terminated out of our database 230 employees since June. And I will.
Yes, send it in. Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. And last, but not least, we have Jake Metcalf. Welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Board, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Jake Metcalf. I'm a father of 4 students that have either gone through or are in the Anchorage School District. I have 2 that graduated. I have a daughter who's a freshman at West and a son that's at Inlet View Elementary School. He's in 2nd grade. I'm here today to ask that you fund the new Inlet View School. Actually 20 years ago, I was sitting in Ms. Bellamy's seat as the president of the school board. And back then we were talking about Inlet View. In 2005, we put design money on the bond for Inlet View. So, you know, this has been around a long time, and there's a need for a new school. There's been a need for a long time. I just want to tell you a story about today. My son, Owen, and I biked to school this morning, and he parked his bike next to a fence, and that fence prevents students, staff, and users of the school from going on that part of the playground. And that's because the sewer pipes were so old that they collapsed and spilled raw sewage on the playground a year ago. And I think it's intolerable that people have to deal with that at an elementary school in Anchorage. So I'm asking you to do something about that safety concern. It shouldn't be that way. There's some other reasons why we need this school. That part of town is going to grow over time. We have a tremendous amount of money coming in from the federal government, thanks to President Biden's work. And that's going to create a huge amount of employment in this state. There's going to be more students in that part of town. We also have climate change that's creating all kinds of problems. As you saw this weekend in the state of Alaska, you're going to have people moving in from rural areas. You're going to have people moving from the lower 48 to come live here. So from a planning perspective and an economic development perspective, it's essential that you have a school in that part of town. The other thing about that school is it's an IB school, and it's doing a great job. It's one of the top 10 elementary schools in this district. So I encourage you to fund this quickly. It's overdue. It's unsafe, and it's good for our community to have a new school there. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
And thank you very much. Okay, that ends our public comment for the first hour. Written public comments can also be found attached to the agenda online. And that brings us to item F, our consent agenda.
Madam President, are we able to pull items from the consent agenda this time?
One tweet.
Or are we moving to adopt
Oh,
first?
yes. Is it?
So are we asking for items to remove now?
I am.
Okay.
We're at the consent agenda.
Yep.
Does anyone wish to remove any items, or at least not remove? Yeah, remove any items.
So I would ask to remove 27, ASD memorandum number 27 and 30, items number 9 and 11.
I'm sorry, 27.
And 30.
Memo 27 and 30. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to pull 17 and 29 also.
I'd like to pull 16.
Okay. So right now, members have pulled items 4, 5, 9, 10, 11 items. Okay. Okay. We'll just need to take a minute to pull those out before we vote on the consent agenda.
Then, Madam President, I can make a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda when you're ready.
Okay. All right. So fine. Was it Anthony?
Yeah.
All right. Now we'll take a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda items.
Madam President, I move to approve the remainder of the non-pulled consent agenda items. Second.
Moved in second to approve the remaining items on the consent agenda. That would be items 2, 3, 6, 7, and 8. Let's see. Is there any opposition to approving the remaining items? Seeing and hearing none, the consent agenda stands approved as with those remaining items. So now let's start. We're going to not start in the order pulled, but just the numerical order of the memo, please, if that would be okay. Item 4, which is Memorandum 16, was pulled by member Lessons. Yes. Sure. Hold on. I need to see if there's anybody here that wish to speak in the audience that wish to speak to memorandum number 16. Oh, okay. All right. Hold on. We got a procedural. Don't speak yet, Kelly. So item 4 is memorandum number 16, request for budget transfer, special ed department related service division account. When a consent agenda item is pulled, it goes immediately to action or under action. Okay, ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Madam President, I move to approve ASD memorandum number 16. That is the administration's recommendation. The school board approve budget transfers of up to $2,860,586 for the special education department's related services to division to provide speech, language, and occupational therapy services for students with disabilities.
Is there a second? Moved and second by member Higgins. So now, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to testify on item 16? Seeing and hearing no one, member Lesson, speak to your.
Thank you
motion.
for this opportunity. I'm supportive of the memorandum, but I wanted to pull it to use this as a space for conversation. So other than authorizing this $2.8 million transfer so that we can continue to serve our students with disabilities by utilizing contracting agencies and added duty addenda for permanent employees who I assume their loads will be larger, what can the board do to help close the gap of the speech language pathologists and occupational therapists? And, earlier tonight, we heard about internships with psychologists coming from the lower 48. I guess that's really more of an administrative thing, but that can we advocate at legislative level? Should we be advocating at a federal level for changes in how people are licensed? I mean, this is a huge gap. We need to be able to serve our students. And I'm just wondering, other than saying yes to this memorandum, yes, and how else can we help?
Sure. I think you bring up a number of great suggestions, especially at the legislative level as we go into the next legislative session. With that said, are there specific strategies that the special education department would like to share at this point?
Oh, we should have brought you the mic. So sorry.
Good evening to the president, to member Lessons. The special education department, we do a lot of recruitment outside of Alaska because we don't currently have a lot or any related services programs within Alaska. So our speech and language pathologists and our leads, as well as our assistant directors and occupational therapists, work with universities to recruit those speech and language pathologists as well as occupational therapists. And as Linda mentioned earlier, our school psychologists. Some of the barriers that exist within that is that it is also a nationwide shortage of related service providers. So when we get interns that do come up, that is our greatest chance of getting them to stay within Alaska for several years or 5 years, 2 years. It just kind of all depends on their family situation. But one of the things that I think would be super beneficial is really understanding that Alaska's regulations in terms of those positions are nationwide It's the nationwide criteria. So those speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, or what have you, many of them are certified through Alaska, but they also have their national certification that supports that work. So Alaska changing that criteria looks very different because it is a nationwide responsibility of like the Speech and Language Pathology Association and Occupational Therapy Association. What we could explore even further are assistants for occupational therapy assistants and speech and language pathology assistants. And we're also working on supporting those efforts by supporting our current speech and language pathology assistants and potential CODAs into going into programs where we're supporting them financially.
Could you identify yourself for the record?
I'm sorry, I'm Charlie Wayne, the Senior Director of Special Education.
Thank you. Did you have another follow-up?
No, but just let us know how we can help our students.
Will do. Thank you.
Any other comments, follow-ups? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote because we have 2 members that are remote.
Member Donnelly?
Yes.
Member Higgins?
Yes.
Member Holloman?
Yes.
Member Jacobs?
Yes.
Member Lessons?
Yes.
Member Wilson?
Yes.
And President Bellamy?
Yes. And that motion passes unanimously, 7-0. Thank you. Thank you. Next item.
Madam President, I move to approve ASD Memorandum number 17, renaming of the West Anchorage High School Stadium. The administration recommends that the Anchorage School Board approve the request to name the West Anchorage High School Stadium the West Anchorage Alumni Stadium in reverence to all of the former graduates of the school.
Second.
Moved in second. Is there anyone present tonight that would like to testify on this memorandum? Seeing and hearing none. I think Member Holloman, you pulled it.
I did.
Okay.
And it's one of those, it's a little bit odd, but being on the board, you get to do that every now and then. Somewhere along the line, we sort of shifted and almost everything goes on the consent agenda now. Where before it used to be just a handful of specific things like the personnel report, which we're not going to debate the personnel report. But it did strike me that in doing a recognition, we really should take a moment and recognize. This one's a little broad and it's West High alumni, but there are several of our schools that have really active, strong alumni associations that make the district function a lot better. And so I kind of hated to see this go as part of the consent agenda, when we should take the extra couple of minutes to at least be on the record about it and not simply that we didn't object to it when it passes through. The other thing I'll note is that when things are on the consent agenda, I think it makes it a little more difficult for the public to speak to it because we don't take it up as a separate issue. The things that potentially we might have debate about, I would hope we start putting in action items again, but we can run that through governance committee and make a recommendation. But I did want to take a minute and say that I do think that there have been a handful of times where I've interacted with a couple of our different alumni associations. They do revolve around sports often, and so this is very appropriate. But they do a lot for our kids. They do a lot for our community, and I think it's an excellent recognition for the West folks. Thank you.
Unless I'm mistaken, I thought it was a non-action last time. And the principal spoke to it. So.
Yeah, it was non-action. I'm just saying that at the moment we're going to vote on it. I think it should be a separate item on our action list as opposed to just part of the consent agenda.
So short of pulling, you'd rather see I mean, you have the opportunity to pull.
Yeah, we'll take it up in committee.
Okay, that's fine. Any other comments on item 5, memorandum number 17, renaming of West High? Seeing none, we'll vote. Voice vote, please.
Member Donnelly,
Yes.
Member Higgins, Member Holloman,
Yes.
Member Jacobs,
Yes.
Member Lessons,
Yes.
Member Wilson,
Yes.
President Bellamy.
Yes. And that passes 6 to 0, I guess. We have one board member not present. Thank you.
Mr. Higgins just gave a belated thumbs up.
Oh, then it's unanimous. Thank you, Member Higgins. You weren't there just a second ago, but thank you. Okay, that brings us now to our next item.
Madam President, I move to approve ASD Memorandum number 27, Safe and Secure Gun Storage. It is the recommendation of the Governance Committee that the school board approve a resolution by the school board to require education on the safe and secure storage of firearms.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved in second to approve memorandum number 0227. Is there anyone here who'd like to testify on that memorandum? Seeing and hearing none. Member Jacobs, did you pull it? Yes.
So thank you, Madam President. I wanted to express appreciation for, I think it's members Wilson, Lessons, and President Bellamy for bringing the original proposal forward through governance. I guess I had a question spurred by testimony earlier. In my review of the resolution and related memo, I didn't see, I want to use the term of fiscal note, but at least a cost estimate. Is this resolution proposing to take action which is going to bring additional cost to the district?
This comes at no cost.
Okay. I didn't think so, but I wanted to.
You are correct.
Thank you.
It comes at no cost. Any other questions? Yes. Member Holloman?
Yeah. The motion suggests that we're going to be educating. My understanding from committee is we're simply passing literature from an outside group. We're not incorporating it into the curriculum necessarily or anything like that. And to a member of the audience that spoke earlier, we are just passing information. We're not, instructing kids to go home and scout things out necessarily, but just providing some info to families. And I think the point is well taken. This isn't going to solve everything, but if it does spur a handful of folks to secure weapons in a good way, sadly, every so often there's stories about kids that happen upon guns in cars or in the house, and it can be tragic if it goes the wrong way. So this is a case where governance is recommending that we simply facilitate the transfer of information. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Holloman. Any other questions, comments? Member Jacobs?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Just to be clear, the motion that I made purely pulled language from the memo from governance, and so just wanted to clarify intent there.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Madam President?
Yes, Member Donnelly.
Thank you. I support the goals of the resolution. I do share some of the concerns of the public testimony that given some of the guidelines that have been adopted by this district, some of the staff might get overzealous with what they do with this. So I hope the administration will keep within the guidelines of this actual resolution and as it's been explained to the board and not exceed those. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Donnelly. Seeing and hearing no other hands or persons wishing to speak, we can vote.
Member Donnelly,
Yes.
Member Higgins, Member Holloman,
Yes.
Member Jacobs,
Yes.
Member Lessons,
Yes.
Member Wilson,
Yes.
President Bellamy.
Yes. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item.
Madam President, I move to approve ASD Memorandum number 029, acceptance of donation of handbells and chimes. It is the administration's recommendation that the school board accept a donation received by the Fine Arts Department of 7 cases of chimes and handbells, with the estimated value being $40,000 for the FY 22-23 school year.
Second.
Moved in second to approve memorandum number 29. I can't remember who pulled it. Who wants to speak to it first?
I think that was.
Okay, thank you.
Once again, I feel like we should take a moment on these. This is a very generous donation and something that I think probably Fine Arts would have trouble finding the money to put in schools if it wasn't donated. When I was in a building, I used to accumulate a lot of technology donations. Mr. Fleckenstein probably sat in meetings where they tried to figure out ways to stop that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was picking up some from someone who mentioned that they had a baby grand piano that they'd like to get rid of, and did we want it? And I'd already been lectured on how much space I was taking up, and I said, oh no, not possibly. But when I was talking with the choir teacher a little bit later, he couldn't believe it. And a moving company donated the personnel and truck to bring it to the school. These will be in use for decades. These will affect thousands of students over time. They'll be around for an incredibly long period of time. Again, I think it's reasonable for the board to take a moment and focus on this one item and say thank you very much.
Much appreciated. Yes, Member Higgins.
Thank you. I guess I'm interested in why is this on a approval for us in front of the board, because we got a lot of groups out there donating things to different schools. You can't go through a school without seeing a store doing stuff and other groups doing stuff. And I just don't know what the criteria is. One of the things that used to be doing in the past is in the beginning of the school board, there would be some recognition of some of these groups and some of these organizations that are providing the kind of support they are throughout the community, doing things. And I like that approach to really identify as many as possible that are doing things and give them some recognition. They deserve it. I've worked with some of the groups that have come into schools before. So I want to recognize here, for those who aren't reading it, you've got, I hate pronouncing names. But Herman, and is it Seidel? Seidel, and in honor of Lynn, his spouse, making this generous donation, and I appreciate that. We ought to recognize that. But I just see this as just the criteria at which it comes to the board is a question to me, because we've got so many different donations that different groups do all the time, and different stores and whatnot. So
we became aware of this donation through email sent to the board, and the individual used to work that they're donated in used to work for the Anchorage School District, and so this is a $40,000 value donation, right. And so the department, the music department, wanted to recognize the donation.
And I appreciate that. I see this as an action item. What if the board didn't vote to approve it? Does that mean we don't take it? That's the reason why I looked at it saying, is this require the board approval? But I do think it does require or should be
a recognition.
Recognized.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments?
I appreciate this. I appreciate Member Higgins' comments about yes and all of the other wonderful partners that we have. I just wanted to speak to this particular donation. It is an extremely generous donation. I think one of the unique virtues of music and music education, and in particular with handbells, is that you have to get a whole bunch of kids working together, playing together, waiting for their turn, learning to hear or read the music. And I think that those are life skills that they can take with them. And so I'm just genuinely appreciative of this donation because it's generous, but also the substance of this particular thing, I think really fosters collaborative learning that's going to benefit children for decades.
Yeah.
So
thank you. And I think I do recall that this was a $40,000 donation. Anything over $30,000 requires board approval. So we can give you that background information if you want it, but this was a $40,000 donation. Anything over 30 requires board approval, which is why it's on the agenda. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Point of order, Madam President.
Yes, Member Donnelly.
The last 5.5 years, the voting procedure for the board has been to rotate the voting order. Are we changing that procedure?
Rotate the yeah, I mean, we got a new admin member, Donnelly, and we're not changing anything. We're just onboarding her, and that's one of the items we'll take up with her later. Thank you.
Thank you.
So so will you call somebody else first this time? We are ready when you are.
Member Wilson?
Yes.
Member Lessons?
Yes.
Member Holloman?
Yes.
Member Jacobs?
Yes.
Member Donnelly?
Yes.
Member Higgins? And President Bellamy?
Yes. I don't mind being less. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Good discussion. Our last item? Not last, but you know what I mean.
Madam President, I move to approve ASD Memorandum number 030. It is the recommendation of the administration that the school board approve and authorize the superintendent to dispose of the listed surplus property by sealed bid sale, public auction, or other means as practical in accordance with board policy 3270, sale and disposal of books, equipment and supplies, personal property, and administrative regulation 3270, sale and disposal of books, equipment and supplies, personal property.
Second.
Moved in second. To approve memorandum number 30. Is there any public testimony? Seeing and hearing none. Member Jacobs, speak to while you pulled it.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. So I had some good conversation with Dr. Bryan offline. This is the first time that this has been before the board. My understanding is this was moved straight to an action item and wasn't in non-action status at our last meeting. I read through the memo, knowing the unfolding situation that the municipality in an entirely separate process that we aren't a member of the team in is engaging related to homelessness response. I had a working understanding of what this memorandum proposed, but I did find it to be a bit unapproachable. And so I provided feedback to make sure that we're being transparent as to what exactly is being proposed. But what I've seen mentioned in city public meetings is that this is going to be for a certain number of relocatable buildings, that these will be provided at no cost. And that's kind of the extent that we're involved. And so I guess I was hoping to receive clarification if that's accurate. And given that the coalition has formed a different plan, which we heard some testimony about tonight regarding ice rinks and the Golden Lion Hotel, and nothing to mention with these relocatable buildings. Is this still a need, or do we have a backup plan if that proposal that's been made publicly elsewhere isn't something that comes to fruition? Thank you.
Sure. Through the president, Member Jacobs, that's a great question. And just to summarize, the district has a surplus of relocatable buildings, and it has been a practice in the past for the district to provide surplus to other entities. So for example, in recent months, we provided relocatables to the Kanik tribe. So this is just one example of removing our surplus. In terms of the city's plans to reuse the relocatables, I would need to consult with the city. We've not been involved in the homelessness response strategy, but we were approached by the Muni or by the mayor's office with regards to potentially using these relocatables. So this would allow us to do that if the Muni were interested in using this as part of their plan. Chief Anderson or Chief Holland, do you have any additional insights you'd like to share?
Currently, we have not done an LOA for the actual transfer, excuse me, to the municipality, although they did request them. So if that doesn't happen, then we'll dispose of them through some other means. Currently, what Rob and team are trying to do is for us not to spend money and resources continuing to maintain relocatables that we don't need. So frankly, what their final use by the municipality, if plans change, is less important to us.
Okay. Follow up?
Yeah, Madam President, thank you. I think that's helpful clarification. The only other I guess suggestion I have is it might be helpful when we move something straight. This is more of a procedural item that could be tackled in governance as well. But when we move an item straight to action, it might be helpful to flag that for the board and provide kind of a bit of context as to why that doesn't seem to have been provided here. And I think that that's valuable information too.
Okay. Yes. Let's go with Member Holloman and then Lesson.
Would back up Member Jacobs' concerns. I read the memo and it talked about auction something or other practical means. I realized that when we voted on these in the past, I always assumed stuff is going to auction. And of course, not everything sells. And at some point, the dumpster may just be the logical place for it. But if it is planning to dispose of it in another way, yeah, I would like for the board to be advised of that, just so we know. I also realize these might make a heck of a bonfire somewhere. A 22-year-old relocatable is a building that has had a lot of its useful life used, but to know that there is an alternative route in mind, possibly, I think would be more transparent to the public and the board.
Thank you. Member Lessons?
So I'm not going to support this transfer. I understand that the items on this document range from 1963 to 1993, so that puts them at 30 to 60 years old. The memo says that the repair of the items is not cost effective, does not meet code specifications. It's my understanding that they don't have plumbing predating the Americans with Disability Act of 1990. I'm assuming that they're not super accessible. And even though I recognize that we have excess inventory and it makes sense for us to reduce our surplus, there was a big old article in the paper this weekend that shared some of the task force language. It said that the task force decried the portable building idea for lack of restrooms and showers in the buildings and for not having any feasible locations identified. So just as I'm not intending to pack 50 kids into a classroom because it supports the district's bottom line, I'm not going to approve the use of these resources to aid and abet a homeless response that is absolutely getting dismissed by the people who are thinking about it. So I will not support this.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, let's vote.
Member Holloman?
Yes.
Member Lessons?
No.
Member Jacobs?
Yes.
Member Wilson?
Yes.
Member Higgins? Member Donnelly?
Yes.
And President Bellamy?
Yes. And that motion passes 6 yeas to 1 nay. Okay, and that brings us to non-action items. item H on our agenda. These items will come back to us next week. And that brings us, we don't have any other public comment. And now we're at the item J, board and administration comments. So we'll start with the board. I'm going to start to my,
wait, hold on. Did I miss, can I pull a memo 024 from non-action?
Before you like,
I was not there. I was taking some notes here.
Okay,
I apologize.
We'll go back. Forget J. We're going to go back to H.
Thank you.
Okay. You pulled it.
Great. Yep. So I appreciate some last minute work on behalf of by the board president and Ms. Foster to post for information only some of the memo that the finance committee presented, the memo that came out of the finance committee last week. And as mentioned at that last meeting, Member Jacobs and I had prepared a memorandum for the finance committee's consideration that acknowledged about $115 or almost $16 million that ASD is receiving from the state, and had offered targeted recommendations really for applying those funds towards our pending fiscal cliff and the profound maintenance backlog that we face. I appreciate that all board members attended the finance meeting and engaged in what was nearly a 2-hour meeting with the administration. So it was a great conversation. So consensus items coming out of that meeting, this is really for public awareness, included saving $16.1 million in order to lower the district's projected budget gap to approximately $68 million, allocating $9.5 million for future major capital projects across the district, allocating about $7.3 million for the construction of secure vestibules and security improvements during 2023 at the 7 elementary schools assessed as having the most pressing needs for improved security, allocating $38.4 million for the district's most urgent capital improvement projects in 2023 at 11 different sites, and then also allocating $3 million to address a backlog of over 2,600 minor maintenance projects. We heard a little bit about that last week or at the last meeting. And I think additional discussion about the remaining $37.6 million was really philosophical, and different board members approached it from different perspectives, each of which I see value in. But how can we best serve the needs of Anchorage students and taxpayers with our remaining one-time funds? And so as we look forward to the next board meeting, I hope that members of the public can engage with this question of what is the best and highest use of those funds? How do we incorporate taxpayer relief while putting those funds to good work? Is it in fact waiting until after the FY24 budget is passed? Is it allocating that money as was raised a little bit today in our 4 p.m. work session towards maintaining pupil-teacher ratios for 1 year, in which case we're going to have to confront the same issue and be $32 million poorer the next year? Or do we build a school and say that is a form of taxpayer relief and an investment in Anchorage's long-term economic well-being? So I think that this is a really important conversation. I'm deeply grateful to the legislators who advocated and worked to bring this money to ASD and to other districts across the state. And I look forward to a robust conversation in the next board meeting. And I will just point out for a point of order, really, that as testimony reflected tonight, that the Urban Design Commission did unanimously and unrelatedly approve the Inlet View Elementary School redesign later the same night as our finance committee. So that happened afterwards. So that is the update that I wanted to bring.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on 24?
Madam President?
Yes. Member Donnelly.
I greatly appreciate the remarks by Member Lessons. I think possibly Member Holloman and probably in the past, Member Higgins have been through some very challenging budget reduction scenario processes. the one we're facing over the next 3 to 4 months is much more serious and much more dramatic than anything I think anybody has faced here before. And the money that we're very lucky to have from the state legislature is totally fungible and can be applied to whatever the board decides are the absolute highest priorities. And buying some time might be the highest priority of this board to the otherwise devastating operating reductions that we might be forced to make in the very near future here to fill the projected $60 to $68 million gap. So I think the public needs to know that this money was not dedicated to capital projects, but was provided to the district for us as a board to determine the highest priorities. And the money that's there could be very, very significant in reducing the immediate losses to our students from budget reductions over at least the upcoming school year. And it's just something to keep in mind, just how serious that's going to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Donnelly. Any other comments? Yes, Member Holloman.
Following in that same vein, it is worth noting that the money that we have from the legislature is the epitome of one-time money. It's not something we ever expect to see again. They rarely go back and backfill from previous years. And it would possibly buy us a year, which is my recollection of how it works in the Anchorage School District. Every year I've been involved, and it's only been 25 of them. So I do think it's going to be a tough call because we do have a single large project that would eat up a bunch of it. We are facing a severe shortfall. We also have a building that's in dire condition. And I think the big question is the long horizon a year out or 5 years out or 10 years out? And it is one I hope the public takes note of and provides feedback on. It will be a tough decision, and you're right, the cuts we're looking at are more severe than any other time in the past I can recall. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now I think we can move on to Jay. School board and administration comments. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Holloman.
I did want to say the concern about the Dempsey, and I'm going to out myself as one of those people that doesn't follow a lot of hockey. I have been to some games, but I actually did not realize the proximity of Dempsey to the West Romney campus until it was pointed out. One person said we should talk about getting a letter together, and I want the public to realize that we don't talk amongst ourselves. We do follow the Open Meetings Act, and I'm going to say that the school board, I think, is very good about following it both to the letter and in the spirit, which means we don't ever get together in a group of more than 2 or 3 and talk about school district business. So I would ask of the administration that they take a look at security and the impact of the kind of homeless traffic that may be generated under this plan, and come back to the board if you have concerns. I don't know all the details of what the municipality is planning, and I don't know what the fences look like. I don't know what the traffic patterns look like. It is an area of high concern. I know from folks that were using Ben Bokie, which I do know the location of, in relation to the Sullivan, when we were still using it for some of our games while it was being used as while the Sullivan was being used for a homeless center. So that unfortunately is just a high area of concern from that. I did also want to say that I appreciate the comments from the totem president, and that again, and I think probably I'm going to say this in a lot of meetings, We plan, we make budgets, the administration makes plans, everything's in place. When the bell rings, it falls to the buildings and the people in them to actually make something work every day. And they are working. When they're short-staffed, it means the people that did show up have that much more to do, whether it seems doable, whether it seems fair, whether it's a good way, but they do manage to pull it off. Bus drivers, of course, there's not much way to fake that and get through the day. If the bus doesn't run, the bus doesn't run. But every day there are people that are out, or there are things that arise. There's just a lot of static, I think, being generated about what people in schools are doing. And the suggestions from a lot of different areas are that they're really busy with things that don't impact the education of our kids. From my decades in the classroom, I know that's not true. I haven't seen anything lately to suggest that it's changed. It is about education. It is about the basics. It's about other things too, because kids spend so much time there. And as it turns out, they drag a lot of their problems into school with them because they don't have anywhere else to put them. And we deal as best we can with that too. The presentation about trying to coordinate and really effectively work on mental health with students is possibly one of the most exciting and revolutionary things that we've done in decades, because it's addressing something we've just kind of like tried to deal with the worst of, or deal with the unavoidable aspects of, and to actively be proactive and try to make some of these things go away, which I think was the impetus behind middle school when it was rolled out. And I believe that if we go back and look at the statistics on negative interactions between students and the justice system and on behavioral issues, that after middle school had been in place for a few years, we saw an impact on the kind of behaviors that we had at high school. Haven't seen those stats in a long time. They're from the early 2000s because we began the phase into middle school in the late 90s. But this is a tough call, because a lot of people will say it's not our job to affect behavior. But the reality is we can't function unless we do. We have a lot of rules. We have a lot of regulations. They used to be about making everybody stand in a straight line. It's way more complicated than that now. So again, this is something folks in the buildings are going to make work, and I applaud them for it. But I also just want the recognition to go that they are struggling with what they have and what they need to do every single day. Thank you.
Thank you. The lessons will come to you.
Sure. I would appreciate, I think, I'll echo Member Holloman's request for a letter from the administration with respect to a position on the Dempsey Arena's proximity to Romig and West. Personally, I'm shocked that it's an option. Shifting gears, I'm really grateful for other things that I've been exposed to over the past few weeks. Recently, a fundraising event by the Anchorage Symphony raised something like $40,000 to bring elementary school students to the Performing Arts Center. I think that's remarkable. President Bellamy and I just started a 4-week Edunomics Lab training session for school board members. This is through Georgetown. And I'm looking forward to being able to share some insights with the board, maybe at the end of all of that, but it seems very effective. Tonight, the first of our elementary school jamborees are back. I know it was at service, so thank you to our PE teachers and health and PE coordinator and our Healthy Future partners for putting this on. I hope everyone stayed dry. I don't know if it's raining outside. I've been able to do a number of school visits so far this fall, and really going into classrooms is the greatest privilege in being a school board member, because I get to peek and absorb and learn about the state of our schools. I just wanted to share some of my observations. I got to see students in middle school engaged in qualitative and quantitative observations in their science class. They were working together as in partners. They were moving, they were enthusiastic, they were practicing their writing skills. It was a wonderful activity. I was able to witness, but I could not follow immersion students who I later learned were debating the merits of government in their immersion language. And to the teachers' great joy, they chose to be governed by a democracy in their classroom. But I didn't really know what was going on until the very end. I've been able to see students learning to navigate their online portals to check in on their assessments, learning how to send emails correctly, seeing them navigating their halls, their lockers and hallway etiquette. I've seen support staff keying into students' emotional needs. They're just there at the right moment in time. I've seen and talked to teachers gathered in middle schools for their PLC time, and they've shared that they're seeing catch-up growth and improved behaviors from last year. I know what the elementary math curriculum looks like, and it looks like teachers are becoming more familiar with it and more comfortable with it. They're also even adapting lessons, and they'll say, well, let's make this after so-and-so in the classroom, right? They're making it personal to their students. Had an amazing pre-K visit, focusing on caring, fine and gross motor skills. ESL students, teachers are reaching out to them, their parents, instructional coaches. There have been fabulous music teachers introducing students to their instruments at the start of the school year. And there was a middle school music teacher with some violins, and she said, you must begin with a royal sniff. And it was engaging, it was whimsical, it was good teaching. And then they proceeded with the rest of the lesson, but it hooked them. And I also, when you tour and talk to people, right, you see, oh, we've got long-term subs in a lot of these classrooms. We have larger class sizes than maybe we want to see in some of our schools. I wanted to share that I know that J1 visa holders might be one way we can fill some gaps. One suggestion was that those J1 visa holders might need a little more support once they arrive to Anchorage. So food for thought. And the question about attendance that I raised earlier this evening came out of a conversation with a principal who was concerned about chronic absenteeism. So really valuable to visit our schools, get those boots on the ground insights, and looking forward to a whole bunch more visits to come. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Member Lessons. Member Donnelly.
Thank you, Madam President. Growing up in Spenard, and as the parent of a hockey player, I am familiar with the proximity of the Dempsey facility to Romick and West, and I do share the concerns that we've heard with placing any homeless facility next to a school. I recognize the challenges of addressing the homeless problem, and I'm very grateful to all the effort that's been going into it by our community, but I would support this board taking a position on this matter to ensure that the safety of our students is guaranteed. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Donnelly. Member Wilson.
Sorry, couldn't get to my mute button. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say that I agree with Member Donnelly regarding with kids sports. My kids did play a lot of sports, and there is so much competition in hockey ice time and other sports, for example, soccer field time, to take that one rink and use it for other purposes would be quite a strain on our students that participate in the extracurricular activities, and hockey being one of them. And we really need every opportunity for our kids to have something positive to be a part of, and not have to wake up at 5 a.m. to practice before school, which has happened in the past. So I also support keeping the hockey rink available for our students. I would also like to acknowledge that it is Hispanic Heritage Month. I had the pleasure of attending an event at Inlet View. They celebrated Mexican Independence Day with Latin dance performances, West High School immersion students singing, Spanish poetry. I'm not sure how many of you know, but Inlet View has, as part of their curriculum, the students learn Spanish. So it was a nice opportunity for the families to come out, have a family night, and have an appreciation for those cultural activities. So I really enjoyed attending that. I also wanted to share that our communications meeting is scheduled for Thursday, September 22nd at noon. So coming up here in a couple days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Member Jacobs.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll be brief. I intend to engage with our partners on the Assembly and check in with you this evening or early tomorrow about a way we can draft a letter to the municipality expressing to have a seat at the table if the Dempsey is going to be used. I think that's a reasonable ask, even though we're not certainly not part of the response team. With there's children's safety involved, we certainly should be at that table. So that's my intention. Obviously, we have a meeting with them later this week, but this seems to be a pretty pressing issue. So I do appreciate the community who came out and raised awareness. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Jacobs. Member Higgins.
I'm in competition with Member Holloman on time, but that's okay.
Yeah, tonight you are.
Competition. Love it. I think I join everyone else when it comes to the Dempsey Anderson issue. I'm familiar with that situation. Kids played there with my kids, and I realized that this is a different situation. It wasn't that many years ago for the pandemic. The homeless issue was just complaining about, do they keep their tents up and things like this. Now we're worried about them in a more humane way, and and how to solve that problem. There are all options out there. They've been all over the press as far as what they could do. Dempsey Anderson is not, to me, the best solution to that issue. So I joined the rest of the board members in support of that. We had a number of discussions. I just want to real brief comments. It was interesting on the issue of guns, because the last time I spoke, whether or not talking to kids about keeping their weapons safe is really going to be effective because it's a parents' issue. But, you know, if anything at all that helps to try to make it so the kids are safer is worth the effort. And that's what it comes down to me. Inlet view, of course, will be discussed next week. That whole issue with all the funding, and you're hearing all the cuts that we could be potentially be looking at, everything about it is just, it's an avalanche of activities right now. In regards to concerns about the educational materials, we don't hide information from kids. We let them see things. We look at it though from age appropriateness, and we're not screening things based upon some sort of objective that individuals might have or views within it. And right now, everything I've seen is for screening materials I've been very pleased with. We listen to the concerns about staffing in every area in the Anchorage School District. And I've said it before, you got 27,000 less adults working than 10 years ago. Every organization goes in, is looking for people, and we're no different than anyone else with that. And that's going to be a tremendous ongoing problem for us. Whatever we can do within that, we need to do, but I don't have any answers for it. No one else in the whole country is in that category. The efforts to try to fill positions through contractors is not the best way to do it from a management perspective, but your alternative is not to have it filled. And so I think the administration is making good effort there to make sure that we're meeting the needs of kids that could have critical needs in this case of support. And I appreciate that and supported it that way. And with that, that's a record time. I know I did not win against.
I'm just so proud of you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
What about you, Dr. Bryant?
I just want to share that, like Member Lessons, I'm looking forward to many more school visits to come so I can continue to meet our staff, get to know our communities, and start thinking about what are the opportunities to really take academic performance to the next level.
Thank you. So I just have a couple of comments. First, an announcement for the board. It is time for us to do our self-evaluation. We are actually late. We're going to do it a little bit different. We're going to work in pairs to do the initial, and then we'll come together at a later date to figure out where we are. And that's because we are using all of our work session time to focus on the budget. And I'll try to find another day, another hour for us to, and we can do that virtually, I believe. So look for an email from me on that. What I understand about the Dempsey Anderson situation is that it is a preliminary recommendation that the task force will be taking up tomorrow from 11 to 1. So it might come off the list. Parents have been, and in my responses to parents, I've been asking them to also share their thoughts with the assembly, and I've shared the information about the meeting tomorrow. So it is on the list but it is a preliminary site. Let's hope it goes away tomorrow. But if not, I certainly am willing to take a position on it and get that to the board as well as share it with the assembly on Friday. So I also have been enjoying my school visits. My goal is to get to every school this year. However, I'm going to be creative with how I get to those schools. I'm just going to say it like that. But everybody, I mean, the kids are amazing. The staff are amazing. I was a crossing guard for a couple of days when the buses switched. That was even fun. It was cold and wet, but fun. I participated in a civics class at Lake Otis, and they actually invited me back. I went to the learning breakfast at Susitna, and the kids were so amazing. They only wanted to know, how old are you? How old are you really? Anyway, they were amazing, and they did this wonderful project where they decorated these pizza boxes because the pizza boxes were going to be their portfolio boxes. So anyway, there's just lots of good stuff going on, and I'm just really, really pleased. I look forward to sharing some information with the board from my workshop this last weekend with the Alaska School Board Association, as well as from the Edunomics course that Kelly and I are taking. And I struggle with data, but they make this quite easy and very entertaining, actually. So it's worth our time. It's a 4-class series, and I'm looking forward to continuing that. So with that, somebody, let's go. Move to adjourn. Second?
Second.
Moved and second that we adjourn. Seeing no opposition. Thanks, everybody.